Welcome, everyone. This is number two in a series of stories that Jan and I will be telling concerning 44 years of marriage and the way God has blessed us and the adventures we've been on with God right there with us the entire time. Now, today's story is a continuation of last week's story. And if you'll remember, we had just had this tremendous spiritual battle. And after the dust settled from that, everything there at the little church we were serving there in Wrocław, Poland, in the Triangle, everything there kind of got back to normal. We had some teams coming from the United States, mostly from Kentucky, as a matter of fact, and everything was going good. Now, at the same time, the mission organization I was with wanted us to get further training. So they sent us to Prague in the Czech Republic for training. Now, Prague, in my opinion, is the most beautiful city in the world. And, we've seen a lot of cities, and Prague is just gorgeous. If you ever get a chance to go there, I would say go to Prague. But we went, somebody's got to go for training in Prague, right? It might as well have been us. So we went there for training, and they were training us about house churches or groups, small groups, community groups, people meeting together in groups. Now, this was really good, and I knew that this was what we were going to be trained on because when they considered us for the positions we were at in Wrocław, that was one of the things that they said, that we were going to be in charge of trying to help start small groups, cell groups, house churches there in this area of Poland. We had the southwest corner of Poland. And so we were up there getting all this training. It was great. I mean, they were bringing in all these experts from all over the world because God was moving all over the world, and he was using groups like this. He was using cell groups and house churches and all these things. I mean, all these movements of God were going on in the world, and they were using this particular thing, the small group. And so all this training we were getting, and I'll tell you, I was what was called a strategy coordinator for Southwest Poland. And I was in there in this room with all these other strategy coordinators. And I was thinking, what in the world am I doing with these people? There are people there with doctorates, and people that have been missionaries for years, and people that were really smart, and people that have written books. And I'm going, man, I don't belong in this group. Anyway, I sat in the back, as far back as I could get. By the way, that's how I got through seminary too. I sat in the back all the way as far back as I could get, and I kind of hid back there in the back, hoping nobody would ask me to talk. But I sit there and listen. They had all this training coming at us, and it was 6 weeks of this great training about small groups, about house churches, about cell groups. I mean, we're getting all these experts in there. Oh man, I was just my mind was just overflowing with all these things about small groups. And so we got done there, and we went back to Poland and went back to Wrocław. And the first thing that happened was that little church in the Triangle, right there, they wanted us to come and give a weekend retreat and share with them all the information that we had gotten there in Poland. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. That's what we're supposed to do. Yeah, I had to write up a strategy plan. And that was one of the strategies I put in my strategy plan while we were up there for that 6 weeks, is to share this information. So I had 6 weeks of information, and we had a 2-day weekend retreat that we were going to try and jam all this small group, cell group. Now, Jan and I had decided to work with this particular church there in the Triangle because they were one of the few churches, the few Baptist churches there in Poland that had already started groups. And they had 2 groups before we even started. And I thought, wow, they have already got an idea of what they want. Now, the other reason we wanted to work with this church, because they also had 2 extremely great pastors. And I want to tell you, one guy, he had just the heart of a servant and the heart of a shepherd, and he loved the people so much. And I mean, you just could tell that he had passion for his church and passion for his people. And the other guy, well, besides being brilliant, he was getting his doctorate in England while all this was going. The other guy was just full of excitement, and he was just bubbling over with enthusiasm. And so we were working with these two pastors in this little church, and they wanted to hear more about small groups. So Jan and I got our thinking caps on, and we took all 6 weeks of this and we boiled it down into a 2-day retreat. And we went up there, went to this little place, this little beautiful retreat, kind of like in a mountain setting with trees and everything and streams. And we were in this big building, and we all met there, and they had, I think maybe about 30 of their church members were there. And the guy with all the enthusiasm, the pastor with I was so excited all the time. Well, he was our translator, and we went right into all this material. And it was very well received. And I asked him, why is everybody really paying so much attention? And the guy that was translating said, well, in Poland, we really respect people with white hair. Okay. Yeah, even back in 2003, I had white hair. And so, they respected and they were listening, and I was sharing all this, and you could tell they were really engaged. And so we finished that weekend, we went home. Now, one of the things that I had to do for the mission organization was I had to send in reports every month. It got to be time. This was in November when we had retreat. In December, I had to turn in a report towards the end of the month. And one of the places that you had to fill out was how many groups were started this month in your area. And so, I had been turning in zeros and ones and, 1, 0 of how many. And so I thought, well, we had that retreat. Something might happen. Maybe they started another group. I could put down 2 this month. So I went and I talked to, I called the pastor, with compassion. Oh man, this guy's great. I asked him how many groups they started after we had the retreat. And, he didn't speak very good English, and I don't speak very good Polish. And so we were having some trouble communicating. And he said, well, let me count and make sure. And I said, he was going to call me back. And I said, you have to count and make sure. I mean, 1 or 2, what do you have to count? And so he went and called me back later. And I kept hearing him say 26. And I thought, that can't be right. There's no way they started 26 new groups in 1 month. Well, I was wrong. They did. They started 26 groups in 1 month after that retreat. And I want to tell you something. That was the beginning of the whole thing. It went crazy. After that month, at the beginning of the year, we found ourselves doing this retreat over and over and doing this presentation of this material to one church after another. Different organizations wanted to hear. English language schools wanted to come and hear it in English so they could practice their English and also hear how to start groups. And so, I mean, we were like overwhelmed with all this thing. And all of a sudden, every month I was trying to get the numbers for how many groups have been started. I mean, it started with that 26, and then the next month we had 52, and the next month we had 100 and some. And then something really amazing happened. It went on a few months like this, and all of a sudden, these small groups, through nothing I was doing, but they caught on in the Catholic diocese there in Poland. And I don't know how this happened, but they caught on there, and these great, huge Catholic churches. I mean, Poland is a Catholic country, all of a sudden they were all starting small groups. And I asked somebody that was feeding me information that was trying to keep up with this. I said, well, how many are there? I got to turn in a report. How many groups are there? And he said, thousands. Thousands, yes, thousands of groups. It was spreading so fast, nobody could keep up with it. Nobody could count it. Nobody can control it. And let me tell you the way it was going there for a while. we had somebody just, we were doing this teaching. We were doing it, every weekend, and it was, we were trying to keep up with everything. And finally somebody calls and said, can I have a couple of people come over? They want to hear about small groups. No, we'll just come to your house. And I said, oh, a couple of people, that's no problem. A couple of people. And so it gets to be time. Jan says, should I have some coffee or some cookies? I said, yeah, whatever we got. There's only going to be a couple people. That night, 25 people showed up to hear about small groups in our house. We jammed them all in there. What was happening is that God was moving so fast, my brain could not keep up. God was going from one thing to the next so quick. Sometimes God stands still because we don't need to be moving. Sometimes God walks and we can walk with him. Sometimes God runs. And sometimes God is flying. And while he was flying across our region, and more groups were popping up and leaders were popping up like popcorn all over our region, it was just mind-boggling. I actually had people from surrounding cities, Polish people, call me on the phone. I don't know how they got my number. They called me on the phone and they asked my permission to start a group. I said, well, of course, start all the groups you want. That's awesome. So it was just crazy. It was just a time where God said, right here in this place, I am going to make something happen. And Jan and I were right in the middle of it. It was amazing. And this was going on all around us. And it was like, if I blinked, I missed something. And sometimes I had to just like catch my breath and say, is this really happening? Am I right in the middle of a movement of God? This is wonderful. And so, sure enough, just as you would expect, my mission organization, we're getting these reports where I was turning stuff in, and they got the one that says, number of groups started this week, not too many to count. I put too many to count, or this month, too many to count. And so here they asked me to go back to Prague, but this time I wasn't sitting in the back of the class hiding. They wanted me to teach all these heavy hitter missionaries about what we were doing. I said, it's not anything we're doing. It's God doing all of this right here, right in front of our eyes. And the only thing is I am just in the perfect spot to see it happen. And it was a very unique position that we were in, because we were overseeing the entire region, and we had connections with all these people in all these different towns and all these different denominations and all these different people, and God was moving everywhere. And he had just directed our path just to be there, to hook up with the right church and the right two pastors, to really, so God could just put his fist down and says, right here, I'm going to shake the earth. Well, so what did we learn about that? Well, we learned that God loves small groups. We already knew that, but we really learned it there. God used small groups in Poland to spread the gospel of Jesus all over. Now, here's my next question to everybody else. When is God going to do that here in the United States? Wow, I can't wait for it to happen. We're staying connected in the church we're serving at now. course, we're retired from active ministry, but we are serving now in a church and we are connected with groups. And I am just waiting for it to happen again when God says, I am going to shake the earth. And you know, when it happened in Poland, it was right after a spiritual battle. Anybody out there having a spiritual battle right now? You know, we call them small groups. We call them cell groups. We call them community groups. We call them Zoom groups right now, don't we? I'll see you guys again next week. Bye.